Hey, thanks for tuning in. Um, in Exodus chapter number 17, we find Israel. They have begun in their journey, and just earlier, after complaining about not having water and misunderstanding God, like as though God had led them out there to just kill them, God brought forth water from a rock. Now we know this is a impossible human thing because what can come of a rock? It's dense. But God was showing them that when things are impossible, it's always Him possible. That instead of complaining, we come to Him. Then at the end of this, he says in verse 8, then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Now, Israel didn't go looking for a fight, but Amalek could see this great triumph of people coming out of Egypt, having defeated the armies of Pharaoh. But it was never the people who defeated the armies of Pharaoh, it was always God. And Amalek comes to fight with Israel, and as they approach, Moses says to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Now, this is the introduction to Joshua, who will be the general of the armies of Israel as they go into the promised land, but also he's going to be Moses' successor when they lead them across the Jordan into the promised place. He said, now you go out and fight tomorrow, and I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So when Pharaoh had them pinned against the Red Sea, and I say Pharaoh, but really it was God, because God was the one who led them right to that place. He said, be quiet and I will fight for you. And here he sends out the men to fight, but he's fighting on their behalf. Moses and Aaron, they go up onto the mount with the staff that has been anointed by God, the staff that parted the Red Sea. He goes up there, it says here, and whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands. One on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. You see, Moses is a cherished leader of Israel, and rightly so, but he's a man. And he grows weary even in this battle. And I see here that he has men, Aaron, his brother, and Hur, who are there to be on his sides, to hold up his hand and to lift him up. And I think that's important for all of us when we are in a place of leadership, to remember that it's never supposed to be, a one-man show. But none of the Christian life is a one-man show. That we're not meant to do life as individuals. We need people who will come and lift us up when we've gotten weak. And so we need to live lives where we have people in our lives that we're transparent with, people in our lives that come beside us when we're weak and weary and tired, and they lift us up, because that's when we experience victory. As Moses had his hands up with the staff of God, but representing the power of God. They had victory. They had never fought a battle before. God had always fought for them, and he's fighting through them now. When we're delivered from slavery, as Israel comes out of the tyranny of slavery and the bondage of Egypt, God delivers them. It was a gift of God's grace. Just as when we're born again and delivered from the bondage and slavery of sin, this is a gift of God's grace. He fights for us. He finds us when we're broken and unable to deliver ourselves. And we're saved, Ephesians says, by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. But coming into our salvation doesn't mean there aren't any more battles. Anyone who tells you, come to Jesus, give your life to Jesus, and everything's going to be wonderful, there are going to be no problems ever again, is simply lying to you. The Christian life will experience many battles. But just as Moses was the representative of God to fight through the men of Israel, Christ is in you to sustain you and to fight on your behalf through you. But never think that you are meant to do this all by yourself. You and I all need other people in our lives to lift their arms up, to encourage them. And so take this for your leaders in your church or your communities. It's easy to criticize. It's easy to take advantage and judge and complain. Moses had his fill of it. But what he really needs, and what your leader needs, and wherever you're at, is you to come up and give them encouragement, lift them up. Try to understand that when they're weary, they don't need you to judge or complain or criticize. They need you to lift them up. And you need that in your life as well. And so he's going here, and that his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. Amalek was defeated by the power of God and the obedience of Joshua to lead a group out to fight, and for Moses to have men who would come along his side and lift up his hands. I think this is just another, lesson to remind us that we were never meant to do life alone. We need people in our lives. When Paul talks about the church, he's always talking about members of a body, never about one person doing life all by themselves, but members of a body, interdependent upon each other. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. See, God already knows the future. He knows that Moses will not enter into the promised land, but Joshua will. And Joshua is going to need the memory that God fights for him. He's going to utterly blot them out. You see, Amalek fought God's people, and now God commits himself to fighting Amalek. Look, he says, the Lord, and Moses built an altar and called the name of it, the Lord is my banner, saying, a hand upon the throne of the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Who was Amalek's enemy now? The Lord. Who was going to fight them? The Lord. He was the banner. You know, when an army was marching to war, it was common to have a banner proclaiming who they were. The Romans would have proclamations of which army this was. And part of it was to stir up fear in the enemy. Who fights our battles? The Lord. He's our banner. Will we have battles? Absolutely. Who is the strength to fight for us and through us? His own Spirit. He says, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers and high places. He goes, life will have battles. But you don't have to worry. You don't have to fret. Because God in you, Christ in you, will fight and sustain you. But don't try to do it alone, because you will grow weary. And that's when you need those members of the body, those friends and companions to come up and lift up your hands. You do that for someone, and let them do that for you. Because we were never meant to be lone rangers in the Christian life. You have a great day and be encouraged.